folks, have to go on and talk about the Super Bowl because I'm a NFL fan. I have been since childhood. I used to play pee wee football. I played football in middle school and high school and all that kind of thing. And I grew up in Denver part of my life and mostly. And I was a Broncos fan, of course. And I spent a lot of time in San Francisco. I became a big 49ers fan. And I was in Seattle. I liked the Seahawks and so on. I don't like the Chiefs that much because they're my rivals, right? Broncos and 49ers. But I've really enjoyed watching Patrick Mahomes and the whole team I like, actually. Uh, you know, they're a great team. The Kansas City Chiefs. It was funny in the interview they had in the lead up to the game, the pregame show with Donald Trump. He couldn't remember Patrick Mahomes' name. And, I sympathize because he's older and I forget names all the time. So I'm not going to hold him, I'm not going to be too, you know, I'm not going to hold him to account for that because it's pretty common. But I don't think he really is a fan of American football. I don't think he cares. He's a fan of being the center of attention. That's what matters to him. I don't think he spends time watching American football with his friends or family. Anyway, who cares? So he gave a good BS account of it. They got a good quarterback, the quarterback there, blah, blah, blah. Then he just BS'd a lot about efficiency and government waste and fraud and abuse and all that stuff. A big smokescreen. And, watching the pregame show and the TV commercials, and I used to work in advertising, so I'm a fan of watching the commercials. The whole production is exciting and interesting to me from a producer standpoint. The production values, the scripts, all of it is interesting to me. But I see through it. My info bubble is so different from an average American because I read so many books and whatnot, and I'm critical of the U.S. system, neoliberalism, and things like that. So you know, everything in the States is geared towards, don't we have a wonderful life here? Aren't we rich? Aren't we happy? You have all these great fast food commercials. And living in Portugal, I really want to try some of that new fast food, a quesadilla with cheese on the outside. So it's just hilarious to me. All these little mini pizzas and flying mustaches and all that kind of stuff. If you watch American TV, Fox News, they had some bit where one Fox news host was an Eagles fan and the other one was a Chiefs fan, and they're knuckle bumping, and it's all so silly to me. It's absurd. But anyway, if you watch American TV all the time, it's just you are going to absorb this feeling that everything in the United States is absolutely fantastic and wonderful. And even if it isn't, and you're going to internalize the narratives, you're going to join a team, one side or the other, and you're going to start becoming outraged by the other team's behavior. I mean, in politics and things like that, culture war issues and whatnot. It's just natural that it happens. You're immersed in this bizarre situation of media constantly, and it's telling you what to think and feel and believe. Of course, we have a certain amount of free will and agency and all that, but basically we're formed, genes and nature nurture, and by the time we're 25, we're pretty much who and what we are. And few of us, like I said last time, just keep evolving as human beings. And even people who are curious and outgoing and well-traveled and autodidactic, or whatever you want to say, like me, and I'm not very special at all. I'm so average, it's sad. But anyway, We travel around and whatnot. It doesn't make us that profoundly more enlightened than anyone else, right? We just have maybe more points of view to explore, more perspectives, and we're maybe more open-minded about certain things, but closed-minded about others. So my frustration, anger, and disappointment with the United States, particularly from 2005-ish onward, is profound and unfortunate. I don't want to feel that way. As I've said before, when I was younger, I was just trying to, make money and be successful like everybody else. So I didn't pay as much attention to it, even though I was still interested in political philosophy and things like that. Anyway, when you're in that milieu, that environment, that media environment, you're going to absorb certain things. And the reactionaries and the new right and the alt right and the new left and the alt left and the totalitarians and the inverted totalitarians and the fascists and the inverted fascists and the this and that and the other thing. Whatever term you want to come up with next to try to describe the predicament that we're in and have been in for a long, long time. Are going to, well, where am I now? I've lost my train of thought. People just become, enmeshed in all of it, and they become believers, and then they get passionately involved, like I said before, and then it becomes part of their identity, and then you have all this cognitive dissonance and so on going on. Very uncomfortable stuff. And we lose the plot if we ever had it, and we don't realize that the narrative and the plot has been created by other people. And it's not a conspiracy. It's like you want to sell more pizza, or you want to convince people that your thing is better than somebody else's thing because it advances your career and makes you more money, and so on and so forth. So, you're incentivized, motivated by groupthink and by your situation and desires that aren't necessarily your own in particular. Like if you went and sat under a tree for a while and meditated, you might think differently. Who knows? Or like in my case, going and living in Japan for 10 years. It does something to you. You have a different perspective on things once you've had that kind of experience. And then you top that off by going to Shanghai and so on. But anyway, that's my situation. But I'm so out of touch with the American thing. And when I watch the whole Super Bowl hoo-ha, it puts me back in touch with, what I used to be enmeshed in when I lived in the States. And even when I was in Japan and Shanghai, for example, or Hong Kong. We have these expat things, an American club, an Olympic club in Beijing, and you join the clubs and whatnot, and you watch CNN, and you kind of have this feeling that your truth, the propaganda coming from your home country is qualitatively better. It's more informed, it's more truthful, it represents reality more, and so on, whatever reality is. And so you do it. I used to go have like an American breakfast at this cafe by my office in Shanghai that used to be at the near the Guojiwan Shoujonshin, which is the international tennis center there. And we would watch CNN and have breakfast, eggs and bacon and coffee and whatnot. And later on, I was like, no, I'm having spicy beef noodles, and I'm having, a Chinese breakfast, warm soy milk, and What am I trying to think of now? Oh, shit. Sorry, I was up late. The Super Bowl started at 11:30, so I was up late. I'm not thinking too clearly right now. But this other thing that I love to eat, it'll come to me in Shanghai. And I stopped eating at the American breakfast thing. Yeah, eventually, I started listening more to the Chinese engineers than the Taiwanese engineers and the Hong Kong staff and the American staff, because I really believe that we were going to get further trusting and collaborating, working more intimately with the locals than we were with all of the careerists, who were working for their to vest their stock options and exit as quickly as they could. But I gradually kind of bleached out or, exited the American propaganda narrative over a period of maybe, whew, man, let's say from 90 to 2005. And then I started slipping rapidly out of it after 2008 because I was so curious about what happened with the financial crisis. And in my reading, it was just opening up new avenues of curiosity for me as to why these things can happen. And I was always curious about politics, but I never felt passionate about anything. Like I used to, when I was a kid in San Francisco, I used to go to the Maoist bookstore and argue with the Maoist communists there. That was on Grant Street back in the day. And it was fun. I would just argue with them. And they had all their books and propaganda in there. And when I was in high school, me and my friend Richard used to carry around a little red book just to fuck with people at school, right? Um, I wasn't passionately into it, but I was curious about it, right? And I was reading The Situationist, Guy Debord, and things like that. And I was interested in these things more to be a gadfly and to appear intellectual than any real passionate ideological conviction. And so that was fun, and I was into metaphysics, as I said before, but I've got dry eyes because I didn't sleep well. So, but getting out of the info bubble, the US info bubble, bit by bit, like I was a religious reader of The Economist and Business Week back in the day. And now I look at those rags and see through them, see them as propaganda and as public relations. It's funny when you're in the PR slash advertising business and you drink the Kool-Aid, you even believe your own bullshit. But eventually you kind of get sophisticated and see through it. But at different levels, bit by bit, the way you see through things becomes more complex and deeper, and in a way more confusing, but also more enlightening at the same time. So I got through that and started to let that drop away. About the time when podcasts came out, I started getting into more things because it was easy to listen to the podcast on the ferry or my commute or whatever I was doing, flying around and so on. And the podcasts kind of introduced me to new books to read. And then I started reading blogs, of course, back in the early days in the 90s. And that opened up some avenues of interest and curiosity that broadened my mind and my experience of how things are in the world. But basically, with the Super Bowl, it's just a wonderful thing to see the production values and the hype and the energy and the fanship and the excitement and just everything that's ginned up around the event. That's all for profit, by the way. Um, my kind of canary in the coal mine for the United States is once the pro sports start to suffer, economically, and Netflix and whatever, you know that America's about to collapse economically. I think if the vandals in power now are trying to grab power, succeed, America will be balkanized. What does that mean? Does that mean like what happened to Yugoslavia and the wars and so on? I don't know. Maybe not. But who knows? I mean, when you have these Balaji kind of weird, crypto states popping up here and there, and you can have your intentional community wherever you want it and invite like-minded people. I can't think of anything more boring. Like in my discussions with Curtis Yarvin, discussions, sorry, we're not buddies. I wouldn't mind being a buddy, not because I agree with his political perspectives and so on, but he's just an interesting guy. But, Curtis is a cosmopolitan in some sense, and a bohemian in others, and a romantic like Carlyle in others. And so he's open to discussions with people. He's not a mean troll. He's not a bully troll. And so he knows the other side's thinking and what they believe in and what they're passionate about. And he's not a racist or anti-Semite or anything like that, even though you want to characterize him as a fascist. I don't think, there are these crude elements there and some overt elements and some dangerous elements, but it's not definitively fascistic or whatever. But, someone who appreciates all kinds of different things and cultures and whatnot. And I'm really a cosmopolitan in that sense. Cospolon, Cosmos, Polis, Salon, but also cosmopolitanism. I love to live in a city like New York or Seattle or San Francisco or Tokyo or Shanghai or Hong Kong, where you have a variety of cultures and different kinds of food you can eat, music you can listen to, and neighborhoods you can go to, and so on. So the idea of going to an intentional community somewhere in Idaho or Northern California or whatever to live with people that are just like me because I'm so fucking this and that and the other thing, I'm so goddamn smart and special. It just bores me to tears. It's like I just can't do it. I mean, when I was a kid, Denver was too boring for me. I mean, there just wasn't enough beatnik energy there for me, even though the beats had long since died off in the hippies. But in the 70s, 60s, 70s, it was still some of that going around, and it was still very prevalent in the culture. But even Boulder, it's not crazy enough for me, right? So I have to keep going and looking and seeking these experiences and wanting to be, in Bulgaria for a while just to see what it's like. And all my traveling, after a while, things start to look pretty familiar wherever you go. You also see universal aspects of things through the differences that you're exploring. And you start to realize, well, Colombia is Colombia, but it's still human. And you still have the wires and you still have the electricity and the noise and the traffic and poor people and rich people and gated communities. And, you start to see the similarities. We're all human beings on the same spaceship Earth and trying to get along. Anyway, I made a lot of jokes yesterday. I wish I had filmed it because it was just hilarious watching the hype and just being in the info bubble for a while. The beautiful American, hyped up, exciting, uh, you know, progressive promise. Everybody has an opportunity. The first responders, the military people, and everything is so great. It's funny when you see these pretenders on the YouTube who are talking about, they're all tactical and they're all soldiers and they're training at the range and knife fighting videos and gear and all this stuff. And you just wonder if these people, even if professional soldiers, so-called recruits, not professionals, not Navy SEALs or Delta Force or whatever, but just a normal Marine, could how they would fare in a trench in Ukraine. I mean, we want this war with China. Who's going to fight it? It's the same thing with Yarvin's thing. If there's going to be a new aristocracy, where are the aristocrats? We don't even breed people like that anymore. We don't even breed real leaders that have brains. One thing I'd love to do, and you can tell me in the comments, one or two of you who watch this, if you'd be interested in me outlining and reading the last half of the conclusion and so on of A Power Elite, because even though it was written in the 50s, it's still it's so accurate to characterizing the American thing and what's wrong with the culture, in particular, the political culture, leadership, and so on. Of course, you have Belichick and these coaches, and you have all these, leadership and so on in the States. Of course, there are leaders everywhere, but they're characterized, they're different now. Their quality is different, and what they're after is different. I don't know what the old school aristocrats were really like, if they were any better than the people now. I mean, you can't really compare the 16th century with the 21st century. It's just so different, there's so many things. But the 19th century, a lot of things you can read from the 19th century, it just sounds so contemporary. We're just people, right? So I'm out of that bubble, and so I'm weird. People think I'm crazy, and I post things that don't make sense to a lot of my friends because they're not exposed to these things and they don't have that point of view. So I understand that. I don't begrudge people for having a different perspective on things. It's nobody's fault, and I don't think mine is that brilliant or anything. Some of these people that I feel so frustrated about and bothered by are very much smarter than I am, and it's sad that they are, really, because I would like to get my head around it and push back if I could, if I thought it mattered and would make any difference. But in some ways, my point of view is just my point of view. Who gives a shit? It's like what goes around comes around. So one thing becomes fashionable and hip for a while, and then another thing replaces it for a while, and then the cycle just continues, and people are just regurgitating and parroting and reworking the same old, like, just read Shakespeare. I mean, if you can get past the language and the iambic pentameter and all that stuff, the themes and the stories are just so universal. And that's why Akira Kurosawa, makes films based on Shakespeare plays and so on. It's just, it's so universal. And that's why it's still interesting to read the Stoic philosophers, Marcus Aurelius or the Greeks today. They never get old. For every kid that takes a philosophy course, they'll never forget being exposed to Plato and Aristotle and people like that. There's so many more, but like Kant or Leibniz or some people, they're just more complicated, and you need more background to understand their thinking. You need a broader understanding of philosophy in general to really delve into and appreciate their thinking. But once you do, it's like, yeah, I get it. And then you can see the spin-offs from these ideas, right? So Mills, the guy who wrote The Power Elite, he's just so prescient in his time and eloquent, the way he describes everything. It's just so accessible. It's not overdone. It doesn't sound like a polemic. He's just describing the culture, and it's very fascinating. So I guess I should stop. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, the Super Bowl was fun. I, I I understand now why Americans just feel like they're living in the best of all possible worlds. Why wouldn't you feel that way? And if you could only get rid of the atheists or the gay people or this or that or the other thing, everything would be perfect. Progressivism as it stands within our socioeconomic system is untenable. It's self-defeating, self-terminating. It's not long for the world, actually. That's because of constraints involving energy and materials. And no amount of tech bro fantasy can get rid of that. You are going to have new tools and better phones and cameras and stuff, whatever you like, your lawnmower. But we unfortunately do live in a situation where there are constraints. So nobody recently has helped anyone rise from the dead or walked on water or turned water into wine. Wine contains water. It's one of the components in wine, and you can make wine. So when people talk about the new king or the CEO that's going to run everything, what kind of a person is that? And I want to ask Curtis Yarvin if he's read The Power Elite, and I want to ask him. I've wanted to do this for a while but I want to ask him, like, where are these people really? Is it JD Vance? Is that the guy? Is it the CEO of Apple that's going to save us? These people have different concerns and motivations. They're incentivized by different value systems. They are not a government bureaucrat. The way they work and advance and the reasons why they have their job is different from a tech entrepreneur or somebody who wants to be an NFL superstar. They're different in kind and style and qualitatively different. So it's just you can't generalize about all that. You fire all the bureaucrats, you're just going to have to train new ones because you're going to need them at the end of the day. And no amount of AI and data centers is going to make up for the work they do. At some point in transhumanism, we're not human anymore, which means transhumanism means the end of Homo sapiens. If that's what you want, fine. You can dream about that all day in your sci-fi world. And maybe, your children will die and there will be just machines, on the planet and running around the universe. And you'll be in your grave saying, oh, finally, it all worked out. But you'll never see it. You're a meatbag and you're going to die. Elon Musk is going to pass away and Donald's going to pass, and some new thing's going to come along. We're going to get all excited about and know nothing about what we're excited about. So anyway, another thing I wanted to share was this piece by B, The Honest Sorcerer. I like his work because he's not energy blind, systems blind, materials blind. And it's a perspective all of us need to have. There's a guy I used to follow who had Just Have a Think, which is about climate change videos. And in the beginning, he was talking about the climate science and the predicament and so on. Now he's just a PR outlet for unicorn companies with solutions to the climate problem. So basically, he's just a PR guy. He's not talking honestly about the situation anymore. He's just plugging companies with, green labels on them. It's sad to see, actually. And whenever I, comment on his videos, they're kind of facetious because, you're not really talking about the causes of the problem. which is our whole value system and socioeconomic system. And that's super complex because it involves culture, and culture is more complex than the hard problem of consciousness, even though consciousness is a broader set than culture. So this guy wrote a piece called Averting Collapse is No Longer Profitable: How the Past 75 Years of Infrastructure Development Has Created a Massive Predicament for Industrial Nations and What Comes Next. So I just watched this Just Have a Think video where he's talking about how we're going to build the new electric grids, you know. And so all we need is these companies and these great engineers and the new science and technology, and we can, just magically renew all of our electric grids, and then we're all going to have electric cars. If you do the math and the breakdown a la Vaclav Smil, you'll understand that there's only so many materials available to make car batteries for electric cars, and you wouldn't even be able to make enough electric cars with all the stuff on the planet for the UK, much less China. So if you're thinking, well, China's going way ahead, they're electrifying everything, and they're gonna 1.4 billion people are gonna have electric cars. Well, good luck with that. How many planets do you need for 1.4 billion people to drive around their electric cars that they have to get a new battery every 5, 8, 10, 20 years, whatever it is? Like, some of these things have the infrastructure has to be maintained and renewed every 20 years. So some of the stuff like sewage pipes and some of the electricity lines and all that, maybe they last, 40, 50 years. That's pretty nice. But, they have to be replaced and maintained. That all costs money, requires energy and materials. You have to have diesel for the ships to move everything, unless everything becomes nuclear real quick, And even then you have Jevons paradox, where you're only going to use more energy the more energy you have. What are you going to use that on in our socioeconomic system? Manufacturing and making more stuff to sell to consumers. Unless you're a tech bro and billions of people die and only the cool people are left, and they can be courtiers and elites, and they can be serfs, and they can be service personnel or kings, queens. Everybody has their little digital crypto, kingdom thing. It's all fantasy, people. It's vaporware, but you'll get excited about it because it sounds cool, and then it'll be good enough for you until things blow up. And the problem is, it will blow up, and you're not ready for that. You're ready for the fantasy, but when it blows up, you don't know what to do. So you just run around in a panic, doing what you have to do to survive. And doing what you have to do to survive will entail some very destructive behavior, probably, on your part, because when it's us against them or me against that other guy, it can get very brutal and short. Nasty, brutal, short. So yeah, he goes through this thing. It's very good. I put it up on Globe Hackers thing, but he's talking about electricity generation since 1950, all the materials. And so we're in this cheap period where, fossil fuels was cheap and very energy dense and very good for everything and transportable. And we have all these fungible things as well, and finance and whatever. But you need diesel fuel for all this. He talks about how that's becoming more expensive, and the low-hanging fruit is gone. So he goes into that. It's very interesting. Just solar panels. How much materials do you have to replace them every how many years? And ephemeralization doesn't cover it, people. At some point, a plastic Coke bottle, whether it's made from kelp or fossil fuels, can only be so thin, right? We're not in an anti-gravity thing with the Coca-Cola just floating around in bubbles and we just eat it from the air or the thin atmosphere. Um, you still need the materials for it, and we'll keep producing more and more and more until the collapse. Of course, the tech bros are going to be there after the collapse because they're rich and they're already building their bug out towns. And if you're smart, you'll get their crypto and you'll try to join their team because they're just like you. Everybody is just like me, and I love myself so much. I'm so beautiful and interesting and fascinating, and I can't get enough of me. And when I look around this community, I just see a reflection of me everywhere, and it's wonderful. It's almost like when I was a Christian, how much Jesus loved me, much more than most people, actually. I mean, I had such a tight relationship with Jesus. Now, I'm in this intentional community with these wonderful people, at Peter's, floating city, and they're all just like me. We have the same values, we have the same concerns, we do the same stuff, and I just find that extremely horrifically boring. If that ever happened, I'd be gone. I'd be like going from one tech community to the next, just like they'd call me a gypsy or a tinker or, yeah, the gypsy. He just goes from one to the other. He's just a pretender. He's not committed to any of these things. But that's freedom. That's libertarianism. He can just change his mind and move to another community. I go to one and say, look, I know everybody here is African American, and that's cool, but I identify as an African American, and I want to live with you guys because I like your music, I like your church better, and so on. And they would say, get the fuck out of here, white boy, whatever. Some would let you in, some wouldn't, whatever. In some ways, I feel like I've been doing that my whole life. It's like, oh, the handsome white boy. I used to be good looking when I was young. Maybe some people thought so. you know, the handsome white boy in Tokyo, isn't he nice? He's such a cute pet. We love foreigners. And he's an American, so he's a cool foreigner. It was like that, open door to Americans, even though Europeans still thought we were a bunch of assholes, even when I was young. You could go around Asia and, you were treated pretty damn good. You go to Thailand, go to Vietnam, go to Indonesia, go wherever, and people are like treating you pretty damn good because you got some money in your pocket and because they think you're safe, or I don't know, but we used to be able to run around, so I could go from one intentional community to another and think I was being cool. This is way before I could post on Instagram, so I don't have any hard evidence. You'll have to take my word for it. So he goes on to the renewables and how much energy and materials you need for that stuff. And so what's the solution? I hear people ask eagerly. Small modular nuclear, perhaps breeder reactors, maybe hydrogen fusion, or all of the above. Well, pray tell how any of these technologies could help us escape the predicament described above. Will they magically repair the grid plug the holes and reduce losses in the system? 2, or will they create cheap, easy to mine resources? Will they solve our coming transport fuel crisis due to a lack of oil? The answer to both of these questions is of course not. These technologies would have to be built from the same old materials, steel, concrete, various metals, mined and delivered with the same old diesel engines and smelted with coal, just like components to the old energy infrastructure they claim to replace. So if you have this cool place in Wales where they maintain and rebuild these old locomotives that are really, really cool. I mean, they're so cool. I used to have a train set and I love those. And when you go there, the smell and the atmosphere and the people who are so into these trains, and they're trains where you can't get a spare part for them, so you have to actually build a spare part for them. But there's a very special kind of coal that they use, and they don't have that coal in the UK anymore. So they have to import it from elsewhere to operate those machines that they're maintaining that they love so much. And they're really cool, these old locomotives, but you can't get the fuel for it. It's a very expensive hobby. And some people are really into it. It's a cool place. I forgot where it is, but in Wales. I love these old trains. So this time, though, they would have to be built from an already fast depleting resource base where all the cheap, easy to access minerals are gone. Meanwhile, all they would be doing at the end of the day is boiling water to make steam and to generate electricity. What if there was no techno-fix solution to the predicament we have navigated ourselves into? A predicament doesn't have a solution, right? Uh, you're kind of stuck. Double bind after double bind after bound, and gagged, and pretty soon you're in a pickle. So how could a civilization built entirely on non-renewable stocks of easy-to-get minerals and fossil fuels last forever? It's a fantasy. You're going to have a multi-planet civilization. That's how. And how are you going to get to that? Elon Musk never delivered, really. And he never created anything new. The electric cars, maybe the code in the software, some people he hired for his, whatever, Teslas or something, is proprietary. But, an electric car, that's not a big deal. A rocket to go to the moon, it's not a big deal. We did that in the 50s and 60s. I mean, in the 60s. None of this is new, right? The idea that you're going to do what he says he's going to do, all the promises he makes, he never delivers on them. He doesn't want to deliver on them. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a pump and dump stock market scam. And he's not going to deliver efficiency and get rid of fraud and abuse in these government agencies. He's going to vandalize everything and rebuild it so that all the wealth is channeled towards himself and his buddies. And he doesn't care about you. He really doesn't give a shit. And he doesn't care what you think. That's why he supports ultra right-wing German politicians and parties. He thinks that you can have these ethnic states. A lot of right-wingers believe that. You can have real Irishmen in Ireland. You can have your DNA tested. I would pass. And then you can live in Ireland and be Irish, act Irish. And, you don't want to be running around the world, acting different. It's just not fun. Ah, fuck, my accent's gone now. But, going to, sure, it's just not possible anymore to be, part of the Irish diaspora. You want to go back home and be really Irish. Oh, fuck it. I lost my accent. Sorry about that. Forgive me. So anyway, he goes into that. Degrowth is a thing. We're going to have to manage how to live in a world that's quite different anyway, even if we do have breeder reactors or whatever. What is it called? The hyperdrives or no, what's this fucking Star Trek? Even if we have this, we're still going to have to manage our resources better. And we can't do this under the current socioeconomic and political philosophies that we adhere to, that we're so stuck with. So we have to do it differently. So it has happened to every single civilization before ours, from the Sumer with their irrigation canals to Romans with their sophisticated road networks and aqueducts. Our civilization is no exception. If you think aging and decline sucks, right? I do. I need time. I want to make my TV series and I want to see it done. I'm sick every day because I'm thinking, oh, fuck. I've got to get this done. And you're getting older, you know. If you go out on a movie set when you're a kid, it's so exciting. It's hard work. It's backbreaking depending on your job. It's boring a lot of times. It's like war, I guess, you know, battle. It's like most of the time you're bored to death and then you're in total terror and panic. But professional crews on movies work very efficiently, usually if they're good, and they get the job done, and it's hard work and long hours a lot of the time. And, you know, even if you're an actor just trying to be up for the scene, you got to be ready and deliver while the camera's rolling and all that stuff. It's not as easy as people think or as fun as people think, but it's still fun. You have to love it. It's one of those things like the locomotives. If you're going to build parts for the locomotive and import the coal to run it, you better really love those old locomotives. So the acting teacher will say, "Why do you want to be an actor?" And the answer has to be, "Because I can't imagine doing anything else. I just can't. I have to be the next Tom Cruise. I have to. Don't you understand?" So, yeah, our civilization is no exception. And if you think aging and decline sucks, ask the elders in your family why the happiest years of their life have arrived at the very end. So, in a way, that's true, right? You know, when you're a kid and you're chasing everything all the time and being disappointed and not quite getting exactly what you want, and it's frustrating and painful, and you know, all these responsibilities you have, and you get older and you're like, I really don't give a shit about that bullshit anymore. You know, I don't need it. And if you're fortunate enough to be housed and fed and have a few friends, you know, I think it's pretty okay to be in your 60s and 70s, I guess, if you're healthy. But your body starts to go and your brain starts to go. And then you start thinking to yourself, will I have the guts to end it all? Or am I going to go to one of these, a hospice? Am I going to die in a hospice? Am I going to die of a heart attack on my bicycle? Am I going to do something naughty to myself if I get sick or, um, you know, accident? You know, it's just like my friend's father had a car accident and has been hospitalized for months, and he's elderly. It's just a nasty thing when you think about it. Life can be really mean and nasty. But, you know, I wasn't born in Syria. I wasn't born in Gaza. You know, I, some people get a better hand than other people get. And that's, it doesn't have to be that way. Things could be better for people. But I think a lot of the right wingers and so on just think that no, 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 there's a hierarchy. Some people should be bred to do these things and other people should be bred to do those things. And there's no equality, absolute equality. Of course not. But, you know, I'm just the kind of person that wants to see people have a chance, an opportunity, educate them, see what comes of it. You know, we need education and we need good breeding for everybody if we're going to have thoughtful leaders with an intellect that really understand how things work. And where they don't understand how things work, they know where to find the answers, who to go to, who to trust, who to work with and collaborate with, you know? Um, so that's the kind of people we need. It's not Elon Musk. It's not J.D. Vance. It's not Donald Trump. And it wasn't Biden either. And it wasn't Kamala Harris or Kamala Harris. It's none of these people. We don't make them like we used to. Maybe we never did. Or maybe it was never ideal. I'm sure it was never ideal. But we could do better if we wanted to. But again, it's like too many people have this idea like, yeah, for me and mine, okay, I want it. But not for those other motherfuckers. You know, it's just so sad that they have that feeling. You know, for me and mine, sure, not for them. They don't matter. They don't count. And if you think about that and extrapolate that to nature and to the ecosphere and so on, you're in a bad, bad predicament, which is where we're at now. So PR, the advertising, and the bullshit isn't going to save us. Bully MT, out.